Welcome to the Global News Podcast on YouTube, where we go behind the headlines of a story and tell you why it really matters. I'm Samira Hussain, and on this last episode before Christmas, we're looking at Ukraine. And we're going to discuss what's going on in the war, but also how residents are feeling as the conflict nears its 4-year anniversary, and where peace talks are at. To discuss this, I've got Samira Hussain, who's with me live from Kyiv. Samira, thank you so much for joining me and for your time. I guess we're speaking to you as we record on the 23rd of December, so just a couple of days away from Christmas. But sadly, no swift sign of the war ending anytime soon. It's frankly quite the opposite.
Yeah, this morning in Kyiv and all across Ukraine, in fact, there were hundreds of drones. Actually, according to President Volodymyr Zelensky, there were more than 600 drones that were unleashed right across Ukraine by Russia. And Ukraine's air defense systems really kicked into gear, and they were managed to be able to sort of protect the city. But you can see behind me, there's this building that was completely bombed out, and that was a result of one of the drones hitting this apartment building. There were 5 people that were injured here. And you can see just how quickly people are getting the roof and trying to put it back together again. And that's just because it's really cold here, and it's going to get even colder as night falls. So there's a real sense of pressure in order to be able to try and make these buildings habitable for people as the temperatures start to drop.
And you've been speaking to some of the residents as well. Just give us a sense of how they're feeling and some of the conversations you've been having with them.
Yeah, one resident I spoke to actually lives in one of the apartments right over here, and she described the moment when the drone hit and just the loud noise and that all this debris sort of fell into her apartment. And she was saying that, she's very lucky to be alive, that had she been sat in another part of her apartment, all this glass and debris would have hit her and she would have for sure been injured. I was speaking to another couple as well, and they just described being, up to their daily morning routine when suddenly they heard this blast and they felt the reverberations in their apartment and things started to fall. And they were still they still had this sense of shock, but they were also quite angry that this attack happened, angry that the war continues, and angry that this is all happening around Christmas time. And we heard from President Zelensky, who had earlier warned about the potential for more attacks around this time of year, that he said that, look, this is in Russia's nature. This is a time for people to gather with families and to celebrate. But now we're seeing that this is Russia's attempt to disrupt that.
Yeah, and bearing in mind that Ukraine are aligning Christmas with the West in order to, I guess, have some sort of distance from Russia, because usually Ukrainians would celebrate Christmas a little bit later. So I guess, again, the sense of the mood Ukrainians are feeling during this festive season, it looks like it's going to be a very difficult time yet again for them.
Yeah, I went to this St. Sophia Square, which is in Kyiv, and there's this beautifully decorated, ornate Christmas tree, and they were serving some mulled wine in the corner, and there were lots of families that had come together, taking selfies. There were little children that were taking rides in a toy train that was making the rounds. And there's this real attempt to try and enjoy some of the holiday season. I spoke with one man, he's a serviceman, and he was there with his very young daughter and his wife. And he said just how important it was to try and show that there's not just war happening, that there is a festive season, that it is Christmas, and that there can be some levity in this time of darkness. But the reality is Ukraine is still a country at war, and especially if you go to some of the eastern regions, and especially the southeastern port of Odessa, that has really been hit quite hard over the last several days. Thousands of people without any water or electricity. And because Russia's attacks today were really targeting a lot of the energy infrastructure, officials here say it could be several days before power is restored to everyone in Ukraine, which means it's going to be a very cold and dark Christmas for so many in this country.
What more do we know about the European Union and the funding that they're trying to give to Ukraine in order to help sustain their war efforts?
Well, that 90 billion euro loan that was agreed upon last week is certainly going to go a long way for Ukraine. And you'll remember that before going into those negotiations to try and release some of the Russian frozen assets, President Zelensky was really sounding the alarm in terms of just how little money there was left for this war effort. And he made it clear that if Ukraine didn't get any more money, it was going to have to dramatically reduce its drone production. So this injection of cash is certainly going to go a long way.
And of course, the crucial element of all of this are peace talks. Where are we at in terms of trying to find some sort of hope for the future and all of this ending?
Right. So there has been a flurry of diplomatic activity, and we know that over the weekend we saw that Russian delegation and a Ukrainian delegation and a European delegation had all met individually with the Americans in Florida. And we're now starting to hear a little bit more of what those negotiations look like. President Zelensky characterized it as, discussions that are getting somewhere, that we could see some real peace. But if you look at the way the Russian media has been reporting on the Kremlin's comments, they've really been saying that, look, we're not really close to a deal here. There's no major breakthrough. And of course, remember that, yes, they had this 20-point plan that was, leaked, that was agreed upon, or rather discussed between the Russians and the Americans. And there was a lot of consternation because it really felt like this was a deal that was looking to favor Russia much more. And as we know, with any kind of negotiation, with any kind of peace deal, you try and agree upon some of the easier issues first before you get to the thorniest ones. And so on the one hand, Ukraine got security guarantees that it definitely needed from the United States. But on the other hand, there has been no real talk or agreement when it comes to land. And we know that Russia has made it clear that it is still interested in taking large swaths of Ukraine. And that is something that is just unpalatable for Ukrainians.
And Samira, just to finish off, we're hearing all the time from diplomats and politicians, but let's get a sense of what the people are saying. The people that you're speaking to, what are their hopes for peace? What are their hopes and thoughts when it comes to this war ending and when they think this will happen?
There is still hope. There is hope for this war to end, but there's also quite a bit of skepticism. Some people that I've spoken to have said, yes, these security guarantees are great, but, we've had these security guarantees before, and look at where we are now. Others are a lot more hardline, saying that there can't be any peace as long as Russia is around, whereas some others have even sort of accepted that that Ukrainians might have to give up some land in order for there to be some kind of peace. We're getting up to almost 4 years of war. It is a difficult time for so many, and people have become quite weary. And so there is a definite want and a definite hope for peace. What exactly that will look like, I think, is really what people are wondering.
Samira, thank you so much for your time. Samira Hussain, our correspondent in Kyiv. If you would like to get more on this story, do check out our Global News podcast. You can find that wherever you download your podcasts from. Also, do give this episode a like and do subscribe to our BBC News YouTube channel. And if there are any other stories you'd like us to cover, please do tell us by dropping a comment below. For now, thanks so much for your company and have a happy holiday season.